My name is Dana Salah. I was born and raised in Amman, Jordan. And for as long as I can remember, I always knew I wanted to sing. Growing up, I used to spend my summers in Michigan, where my mom grew up, to visit my grandparents. I used to love it up until the age of 9. I got to spend summers on the lake, water parks, I got to enjoy the greenery. And most of all, I didn't have to worry about speaking Arabic, which up until that point was a little bit of a struggle. My mom, when she had me, had just moved back to the Middle East, and Arabic wasn't yet natural in our household. At school, I got made fun of for saying things like water instead of water, and mirror instead of mirror. I think that's how you say it. So, after the age of 9, when, I stopped caring so much about cartoons and music videos, because I used to get to watch Nickelodeon and BET and MTV in Michigan, which I didn't get to do back home. We didn't have that. So after the age of 9, when fitting in became more important than music videos and cartoons, I stopped enjoying going to Michigan. I started to think that my American accent and Michigan were a little cringe. So once I, kind of absorbed that was how I felt, it just started this pattern of feeling split in life. This idea of duality, being pulled in 2 different directions, plagued my life. Modern or traditional, east or west, soft or strong, studious and serious, or creative. When I started the IB program, I felt like I needed to focus. I felt like I needed to choose and completely let go of music, which I used to love doing. I used to lock myself in my room and just sing and write songs for hours. But at that point, I felt like I needed to be serious. I needed to study really hard, get good grades, get into a good college so that I could leave Jordan. And I felt like I had to leave Jordan in order to have a career in music. And my parents weren't going to let me do that. So I needed to get into a good university. I studied really hard. I got into a good university. And I felt like I couldn't have a career back home in music because where I grew up, there wasn't really a music industry for independent artists. And Arabic music had taken a sharp turn from the golden era of Kulthum and Wardeh, artists that I used to love listening to with my grandmothers, both grandmothers, Michigan grandmother and Jordan grandmother. We'd sit and watch these telecasts of Kulthum and Wardeh. It was such a beautiful era of Arabic music. But it had taken a sharp turn into a more loose aesthetic in the 90s that nobody in my family or community would have appreciated me being a part of. After graduating from Duke University, I packed up a U-Haul. Well, first I double majored in economics and theater, more duality. But after I graduated, I packed up a U-Haul and I set my sights on New York City and the freedom that came with separating myself from the world I grew up in. I felt like I needed to leave my country and shed my roots and let go of my heritage to have a career in music. So after I got to New York City, I decided that what would add to that separation was going by the moniker King Deco. Deco was my DJing nickname. And one fall day, I was sitting at the desk of my makeshift studio in my New York City apartment, staring at a deck of cards. And I realized, in every single game, the king trumps queen. And it got me thinking how men all over the world seem to walk through life with a lot more freedom than women do. Then I thought, what if a woman called herself king? There was something rebellious about it, also power neutralizing. And as soon as I put king in front of Deco, everything clicked. The whole musical world around my music, the sound, the aesthetics, the lyrics. I created this world called the Decasphere, which consisted of ancient civilizations, ancient Greece, ancient Egypt, ancient Rome. I referenced olive trees, grapevines, bougainvilleas, the Majnuna tree. I pulled in regal elements and aquatic elements. I wrote songs like Castaway and Atlantis. That was the Decasphere. And I found a lot of success as King Deco. I had 2 viral hits, I charted on Billboard, I performed for 15,000 people, things I always dreamed about. But something still felt a little off. Not wrong, just not aligned. At the end of 2017, when the pressure my parents had put on me to move back home and the burnout really sunk in, I was feeling unfulfilled. I decided to move back to Jordan and be the Ammani girl, the Ammani daughter that I was raised to be. I slowed down musically and I stopped posting on Instagram for a whole year. In 2018, my co-writers and producers called me from New York and said they wanted to visit Jordan. They wanted to see it. And then they wanted to do a couple days at the studio. So we did. And while we were driving around, one of my co-writers looked at me and said, "I totally see where you get your Decasphere aesthetic from." And suddenly, I saw it too. The ancient ruins that were scattered throughout the city of Amman, the olive trees, grapevines, and bougainvilleas that tiled the neighborhoods. The fact that I grew up in a monarchy and during one of the biggest droughts probably had something to do with the King Deco aesthetic and the fact that I was obsessed with aquatic elements. I tried so hard to separate myself from the world I grew up in, but it found its way into my art. In 2019, my friend called me up from New York and said he wanted to take one of my songs to radio. Every artist's dream. Just like that, I put the crown back on, shot a music video, this time in Jordan, and flew to New York City to kick off a radio tour. Whether I was conscious of it or not, something had changed during that year and a half in Jordan. I had started integrating. And I flew to New York. I decided that my wardrobe for that tour was going to consist entirely of tatriz, Palestinian Jordanian embroidery. And I decided that I was going to introduce myself as King Deco, the Palestinian Jordanian artist, not the artist from Brooklyn. I got to meet legendary DJs and I got to hear my songs all over the US on radio stations in New York, Boston, Connecticut, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Vegas, LA, SF, San Diego. It was a dream. We had so many plans for 2020. We were going to release so many records. One of them had incorporated Arabic for the first time, which I was so excited about. We were going to release a song with a French label, and then we were going to kick off a European radio tour. I couldn't wait. At the top of 2020, I decided to put my crown down one last time. I was so confident with everything I'd accomplished, and I wanted to go by my real name, Dana Salah. Not the Ammani girl, but the girl who was born and raised in Amman, Jordan. The girl who created King Deco and the Decasphere. I felt like I was ready to put the two together. At the end of February 2020, I flew to New York to finish shooting a music video, and then, with just my luck, COVID hit. All of my plans fell through and my dreams crumbled. I had two choices: go back to Amman and quarantine, or stay in the US, deal with the heartbreak, and figure out my next move. I decided to stay in Michigan. Michigan, the heart of Arab America. It brought back so many memories. Memories of sitting with my grandmother watching those old telecast performances, locking myself up in my room, listening to albums, dreaming of the day that I'd be able to make music like that. My album comes out this year, by the way, inshallah. I'm excited. And, there's one thing that I feel like most Arab Americans have in common, and it's this feeling, this ishq and longing for the homeland. And by the end of 2020, I felt it too. I missed it deeply. All the things that during my King Deco New York days I thought were suffocating or cringe, I missed deeply. I was ready to go back home. I decided at the end of 2020 that I was going to continue making music despite the hurdles. I was going to write more songs and I was going to release the records that were just sitting on a hard drive, probably 100 of them, because King Deco thought they weren't good enough and she was too much of a perfectionist. But this time I was going to do it from Jordan. 2021, January, I moved back home again, connected with a producer, and when we got into the studio, I told him I wanted to create a record that mixed East and West, reggaeton and debke to be specific. And we did it. We made the music, came up with the melodies, and then I started writing lyrics. He looked at me and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm writing." And he goes, No, we're doing this in Arabic." The little girl in me, who used to say water, freaked out, jumped out of her skin. But I decided I was going to try. And when I was done, we had finished a song called Dueno. that completely changed my life. Took a step back and I listened to it, and I realized that there was a voice that came out in that song that had been wanting to come out for 7 years, that just didn't have an outlet. When I was in Michigan, it was such an important time. It was a really sad time for me in 2020, but in hindsight, it was one of the most important. I was able to integrate that girl, all the things that I thought were cringe about myself. The girl who said water, that in-between kid. And then when I moved back to Jordan in 2021, it really solidified and was mirrored back to me in this song. The song changed my life, not because of anything specific, but because it connected. And the reason it connected was because it was authentic. I had already accepted all those parts of myself when I wrote it. My music started to incorporate the old telecast performances that I watched with my grandmothers and the pop songs that I wrote in Brooklyn. I write dance music, pop songs, and songs that make you happy, but I also write songs about Palestine. I'm creative, but politics and social change are at the heart of what I do. I can speak in rooms like this, and I can sing in places like Amsterdam and Berlin. It wasn't until I accepted all those parts of myself that I was able to show up authentically and create music that connects. And it's the difference between a song that could change my life and a song that's passive. It wasn't until I accepted all of myself that I was able to become the artist I'd always dreamed of being. Thank you.